and improve. And that's just like a very strong upper bound limit for the compute capability and capacity for these models. So by definition, like if you believe in like continued exponential scaling, it gets pretty hard unless you have like an exponential scaling of the supply chain as well, which is something that, again, economically speaking, is not really feasible today. So compute is both the pinch point today. Obviously, we see how much NVIDIA chips sell for and how much startups want them, but is also just a clear limiting factor to the exponential growth scenario. Data is as well. So I think a lot of people have observed that like is there more pre-training data out there? Have we run out of high quality tokens? And there's certainly like some very lucid arguments by some folks that show that some of the scaling laws will be tough to keep up because we just don't have that much more high quality data on the internet. And there's this argument: is video data high quality data? Is video data not high quality data? These are the sort of questions. Text is a very unusually compressed form of knowledge and information. Video is much less compressed. So then, if you don't have enough pre-training data, where a lot of this gets made up for, where there has to be a big scaling to make up for all of that, is in RLHF and post-training data. And so I think we're going to start seeing, again, similar kinds of bottlenecks where the amount of human experts, who are really what's needed to fuel this sort of like RLHF stages, human experts become GPUs in their own right. That basically the number and quality of human experts who are fueling model improvement is going to, in and of itself, become another supply chain bottleneck for the industry.
As we've looked at GPT-2 to 3 to 4, it seems to the outside in almost like linear development that's going on, but clearly there's more stair-step functions along the way. Do you think with the constraints we have and what we just talked about, we're going to hit some plateau at some point that's going to require a much bigger unlock of one of these things to really reach that next major step function?
When you talk to people at the leading labs, they spend all their time thinking about the supply chains for these models. So I think that implicitly, if nothing happens, these will be really big bottlenecks. But that being said, I think that this is potentially the greatest human engineering project that we've ever seen. And so I think we're going to figure things out. I think what that means is you're going to start seeing some pretty crazy actions to try to secure and ensure that the supply chains can continue scaling. But again, I think that's kind of the technological imperative that we operate in.
Do you think we're under appreciating as a society the reliance on Taiwan and the political position that Taiwanese find themselves in there and what that means for artificial intelligence for us?
One very clear indication of the degree to which we don't appreciate it is just in the multiple gap between NVIDIA and TSMC. TSMC trades a dramatically lower multiple than NVIDIA. NVIDIA is a higher margin company, of course, so some of it's it's very well deserved. But TSMC, I think from my talking with public market investors, they get dinged because of this geopolitical risk. What happens? Taiwan is just at the sort of this pressure point for the world.
What's your perspective on open source versus closed source models? It seems to be a big debate these days. Do you have any opinions on that?
As a company, and my personal point of view is to be quite agnostic to how the technology develops. I think that AI is an incredibly powerful and good technology. I think that all development on these models is great, and as long as you have safe open source development as well as safe closed source development. I mean, both can be done poorly and unsafely, and both can be done safely and well. And if you have safe development on both, it's great. I think that open source models are probably a requirement to ensure that AI achieves the full economic impact that it can have. There's a lot of scenarios where you need you just don't have very much compute. You need a small model running somewhere. That probably needs to be an open source model of some form. Doesn't make sense for there to be some small closed source model to fit that need. And so I think it's good for, economic growth and economic prosperity that we have open source models.
I've heard you talk about the competing curves of AI. Can you talk about inequality and the competing curves of scale and democratization a little bit more?
Because of the scaling laws, as the models become ridiculously expensive to train, tens of billions, hundreds of billions of dollars, potentially even trillions in the future, that very clearly limits the accessibility to the underlying technology. Just in the same way that it sounds so non sequitur if you tell it that way that it almost seems like it's what a bad author would write into a book. That you had the everything store and they were so big and bad, and then they ran all the computers globally. It just sounds so unbelievable. And now if you look at Amazon's market cap, depending on who you talk to, most analysts attribute the vast majority of the value of the company to AWS. So this very unpredictable event that Amazon was going to invent AWS and then build that business is actually the core driver of its market cap and value today. It's a very pretty crazy thought, because talk to most growth investors. Most growth investors are trying to very directly understand what will happen to the revenue of this company over the next few years, how predictable